unargued assumption in a lot of policymaking in my lifetime that if you had a racist policy or a racist structure or a racist system, and you replace it with a neutral policy structure or system, then everything will take care of itself.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's not true. You have to proactively, think about the destruction of black wealth, right? That took centuries to get here.
Yep.
That black people were systematically, legally excluded from participating in the economy in most places in any meaningful way until the 70s, and to this day, face all kinds of discrimination, right? You can't expect that that's just going to work itself out. This is why the conversation about reparations is so important.
Reparations literally means to repair.
Right, it's to repair, to mend what is broken, right? To right a wrong. And it gets caricatured as a kind of check in the mail. But it does mean putting real monetary resources against the question, for example, of, I can actually put a dollar figure. I don't know that anybody's estimated it academically, but you can certainly see it in the data. Put a dollar figure on the added cost through your health outcomes of racism, right? We can measure this in the same way that we can measure the fact that black women are 3 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women.
So we know these as, I think especially in Atlanta, because there's very strong black leadership here, there's very strong community organizing here. We know these are issues. In fact, with or without the president that folks may or may not want, these folks have dealt with these issues, right?
Yeah.
And so, as much as, like you and I were having this conversation before, identifying the problem is it's very important, but it's also the easy part.
Right.
But what does your administration look like within the first year of you being there that directly addresses this need to repair, particularly for black families that have been promised over and over and over and over again that things are going to be different?
Right.
How do you tell that to Atlanta? Because that's a story that Atlanta is still waiting to see the results of.
Right. And the reality is you have to show more than tell, right? I remember a neighborhood, one of our most disinvested minority neighborhoods in the city, and we're doing this huge parks thing. Parks is a lot more than Parks and Rec, right?
Yeah.
It's equity, it's health. If you get it right, it does a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we had this major investment across the city, and I wanted to make sure that our first big delivery, the first thing we delivered on, was a place called the Charles Black Center in this very neglected area on the west side. And I swear, until the day we cut the ribbon, residents didn't believe we were really doing it. Because they had been lied to or felt left out so many times for so long by so many administrations that we literally had to do it. And then it was amazing, the step that represented. So I think in many ways I can tell a lot during the campaign. I do my best to tell. We're just gonna have to show. And there are very concrete things you can do. The way I would do it is not just bringing your hand over to the problem, but trying to establish the role that the United States of America played in creating a problem, and then using that to target the resources to fix it. So take segregation in housing, for example, right? This didn't just happen. It's not de facto. There are actually neighborhoods in a lot of American cities that were integrated 100 years ago for the simple reason that you didn't have a lot of public transportation. You had to live close to the factories. Everybody worked at the factories together. And every home was in walking distance. They became more segregated because of federal policy around housing. When the subsidies had all these racist attachments to them in terms of who could take advantage of them, right? So we should be able to then say that if federal resources went into segregating these neighborhoods, we can target federal resources into remedying that.
Yeah.
By directing them to neighborhoods, but perhaps also people, where it's actually not that hard for us to demonstrate that they were on the wrong side of a racist federal policy. So that's just one example, but across entrepreneurship, health, housing, education, and of course the elephant in the room, criminal justice. Right.
How do we make sure that when we're making these investments, we're not continuing to invest in the same systems that caused this problem in the first place? We have zoning laws and rules that have gone into place that have literally split neighborhoods into black and white consciously, and we use those same exact mechanisms in our design and our planning of those cities, and we're like, wait, why didn't it work? I don't understand. And Einstein literally said, you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We are all insane in doing that. So how do we make design of our neighborhoods and planning less insane? And how do you get to the root of the actual systemic issues that are making these problems in the first place? So it's not my kids have to go through that and their kids have to go through it as well.
So as much as I want to drive this out of the White House, the reality is a lot of this has to come from the communities up.
Yeah.
Right? We got to figure out how empowered community, like the people that you introduced me to, some of the entrepreneurs you're working with here.
Yeah, they're amazing.
And what we need is a federal system, as by the way, I believe we had some good groundwork that's been wiped out in this administration, but a federal administration that can scan what's happening across local communities and replicate the things that seem to be working the best and help cross-pollinate them into other communities. Because the answers aren't going to come from Washington. The resources may come through Washington.
Right.
But a lot of the answers are going to have to be built from the bottom up in a participatory way.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just part of it's who's making the decisions and who's at the table. But even that, I've learned the hard way, is not enough. I mean, I remember an encounter early, and it took me years to understand the meaning of this encounter, but we did this kind of Mayor's Night In event where we invited people to come kind of speed dating with the mayor, basically. Come tell us what's on
Unhinged.
just good old-fashioned,
It's great.
And I had one activist from the community who were sitting in my office at the conference table, and he's talking about how we just don't have a seat at the table. Yeah. And I'm thinking, you're literally sitting at my table. And at first I thought, like, come on, man. But eventually I realized the joke was on me, right? Because what that means is if somebody physically at the table with me doesn't feel like he's actually got a seat at the table, what does that say about what happens at the table?
Right. That's right.
And that's where we got to say, okay, yes, we need to make sure that from the senior leadership of the administration to the people we are bringing on as volunteers or funding as entrepreneurs, that it reflects the diversity of our country. But it's also, what are the practices? What are the processes? Do we have a system that calls on the voice that has not been heard first because it has not been heard?
Yeah, that's right. And that's I have, we want to get some questions that came in from the audience as well. So, two things for you. One is, we live in a weird time, and I think you've started a campaign around really pushing issues of morality. And in so many ways, our supply and demand models have surpassed, our ability for our morality to catch up to it sometimes. And it has been tough to have conversations on moral issues. I feel like having tough conversations in this country is something that we're struggling with. You're watching families tear apart because of it. You're watching people not talk to each other because of it, or lie to one another because of it. But I think like conversations like you've done military service, and we need to honor that. We need to respect that. That is it takes courage. It takes sacrifice. Many of our police officers that patrol the streets, this is a sacrifice. But there's also sometimes in the world we live in, we create a binary where you create a hero and a villain. And in our military, it's the hero is the military, and then Muslims are villains. And our police officers are the heroes, and the young black kid who's just walking down the street becomes the villain. And our brains are not having the right conversation that I can both love the military and be really sad when people are casualties of war. How do we have that conversation in America? Because until we have that, I feel like I'm always going to be I have to choose one side or the other.
Right. So what I don't think we have to do is moderate our values. I don't think reaching out to people who have a different view than we do means, so for example, in the case of the ideological spectrum, pretending to be more conservative than we are.
Right.
My experience in South Bend actually is that if you're strong in your values but try to be candid and respectful about it, you can actually command more respect on the other side of the aisle than if you look like you're just trying to take over. Right? what then has to happen is a process where there's a humility that's got to go into this, that the world is not divided into good people and bad people. And I actually think the left has as much trouble as the evangelical right, or more sometimes, accepting this. And, your politics, for example, does not make you a good person or a bad person. I think there's good politics and bad politics. Obviously, I passionately believe that, or I wouldn't be doing this. But we cannot walk around believing ourselves to be superior. And at a moment when we've got to look, especially when we're confronting hate, for example, one of the things we're going to have to do that will not be easy, and I don't have all the answers on how to do this, but in the same way that when I was in the military, I learned about the practice of counter-radicalization, right? So there are a lot of people, especially, obviously we were dealing with it in the context of dealing with Islamist terrorist movements, and the fact that a lot of young people get caught up in this, and you want to have an answer besides